I'm Glenn McGinnis, and this is Outburst. On the program, should AI be included as an educational tool in schools?
Under some circumstances, yes.
Education should be as creative and as fun as possible.
I'm not too sure on that one.
You're going to have to be able to disclose how much of your thesis was produced by AI.
But first, as gas prices continue to rise and the inflation rate in this country is cooling down, high food prices continue to weigh heavy on many Canadians. This means many people will have to make some difficult decisions, compromises, and sacrifices in order to make ends meet every month. We sent our cameras out to ask Canadians if they had to forego buying or doing certain things in order to keep their overall costs down. Our question:
what are you giving up due to inflation or the cost of living?
Well, I mean, I don't drive, I bike, I walk. I go to thrift shops because they're cool, and I don't know, just stuff to make it cheaper in the pocket but still look respectable at the same time. So
I would say more of like the luxury things, like going out, more pricey clothes and makeup and things like that. Yeah, you don't go out to like a movie as much as you would anymore. Like, I think the price is now like $20 a ticket. It's crazy, you know, just to like do those luxury things. I think most of the time you gotta keep it basic and then just treat yourself every once in a while with the new high costs. But I'm fortunate enough that I can afford the basic necessities still, but I know that's not the case for everyone.
Mostly trying not to spend as much as I used to, I guess, just on random things that I shouldn't be buying at the time when I can be saving money and trying to put it towards something else, either a trip or down payment for a house that I'm trying to save for later on. And
it's the extra stuff, right? So I'm concentrating on the things we need rather than the things we want, and the things we want go on a list that maybe we'll get to, type of thing. Yeah. So it's the treats, it's the going to the local restaurant, which is a shame because I'd like to support them. It's those type of things that I've cut back on.
I don't go and buy a new car every year. I don't lease it. I still do traveling because that's who I am. Don't eat out very often. Buy less booze. So I am one of the fortunate few.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's struggling to put money in their bank account, right? So I work in banking and finance, and I deal with planning every day. So I think what I'm personally giving up is, my standard of living, for sure. You can't afford as much of a house, as much of property. You can't build wealth as quickly. It's a little bit of a trickier game out there these days. So I think that's part of what I'm giving up is more money left in my pocket at the end of the day.
I don't know that I would say I am truly giving up anything, but I'm very conscious about my grocery shopping. So there are certainly many things I don't buy now because the price has gone up. Grapes, lots of fruit, and that's a shame that people aren't buying as many of the fresh fruits and vegetables. So that, as well as I'm very conscious of how much I drive because of the cost of gas. I do live out of town on an acreage, so I have to drive in. I don't have a choice.
We shouldn't have to sacrifice things that we are essential to us. Like, we need groceries, but also we need to do other things in life. Like, we can't just try and budget everything just for food, but sometimes that's the case, and unfortunately it's not getting any better.
Lots. I would say nowadays I'm trying to be very conservative with my spending, being very frugal, shopping, discount stores, going to dollar stores, going to Winners, whatever it is, because I can't afford a lot of the luxuries that I used to. So I guess it starts with just going to discount stores and getting things when they're on sale.
Definitely. I've been trying to move, which I can't anymore because a new place, the prices are insane right now. Went to Independent yesterday. A whole chicken is like $25, right? So I've had to cut down on a lot of the things that I used to take for granted before, and it's good in some ways. I make most of my meals now myself nowadays, but it's getting too high to live here.
Eating out is expensive to eat out. I'm sorry, but a lot of people rely on people eating out, but we just can't as much anymore.
Trying to walk more, use less vehicle. Certain groceries don't need to indulge in as much sweets and as much non-nutritional food as much as possible. But yeah, gas, definitely trying to limit the vehicle usage.
It's making a difference on our businesses. So we have to be a lot more particular about our profit margins and our products that we're purchasing. I find it takes a lot more work for us to be making sure that that we're kind of shopping around when we need to. So I don't know if I've necessarily given anything up, but it definitely impacts every day of my personal and business life.
I'm just kind of cutting all corners. I'm in an interesting situation. I'm on ODSP and I have a part-time job, so I'm certainly not a stranger to limiting things when necessary.
Well, I'm more conscious of going out and eating. I find everything's just gone up. I may not shop as much. It's sort of, you're really looking at what you're spending per month.
Definitely a lot of impulse spending, that's for sure. Like a lot of extra clothing, a lot of extra things that I want versus what I need. That's definitely what I'm cutting down on.
We got rid of our car in town. We saved a couple $100 for the parking space, a couple $100 for gas, a couple $100 for insurance. It hasn't really impacted our food budget that much because, as I said, we eat fairly simply, and we know how to make the most out of what most people would not consider.
Some people may feel they need to be educated about AI, but would that include using it in schools? For those of us still looking to understand how AI works or what its true value really is, this new technology may prove to be an excellent educational assistant to both teachers and students. We sent our cameras out to ask people if they think AI has a rightful place in our education system. Our question:
should AI be included as an educational tool in schools?
I think that it has potential to be used as an educational tool in schools. I know lots of people use it for content through the generative AI and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily say that I think it would be appropriate for the students to be using it, especially to create content for their own work. But I think the idea of educators using it as a tool to help create content for the students it could be a great tool for that.
Yes, it should be. I believe that education should be as creative and as fun as possible. And AI is one way to achieve that, to keep students attentive in class.
I think so. I think if it's done properly, I think, safely, I don't have a problem with that.
I believe it should be, but on the giving part, I mean, the teachers and everyone can use it to enhance how they present the topic to the students, but the students shouldn't be able to use AI to just forego whatever they are advised to do, because that's basically cheating.
I think AI can be beneficial because we're teaching people to not just memorize things, which I think school does a lot of, and AI just kind of exposes the fact that there's a lot of things that we just kind of put to memory and throw on an exam and just memorize and forget, where AI is a tool that we can utilize to not necessarily do all of that and think more outside the box.
These slow, gradual, ever-expanding cycle of progress and innovation is such that new tools are pretty much always used. There's a historical precedent for that when you look at the printing press as well as standardized writing in the Western world and in the Eastern world, actually. And slowly but surely, as well, more recently, things like the internet, using online databases rather than going traditional libraries. I really believe that AI is a tool for future generations, and it's silly to avoid it on a worst-case scenario assumption that a lot of people might have about it.
They should be taught how to use it, just like we've been taught how to research and how to do critical discourse, how to read misinformation, disinformation, bad information. I think that academics and professors can step up their game. They're capable, they can do this. And I think from the graduate to the PhD level, you're going to have to be able to disclose how much of your thesis was produced by AI. and how much of it is original content and what your sources are.
Well, I definitely think that when people know how to use it properly, then I think it would be good as a useful tool rather than something to use as cheating.
Yes, it could certainly generate interesting information sets based on like the available material that's been fed into it. I am a writer by education, so I can certainly see the value of AI in helping drive a creative method.
Well, there's talk about different restrictions. It does have its benefits, but perhaps in terms of communication skills, it will definitely deter people from developing them, perhaps, especially in the younger grades. They'll just, it's a skill to write a proper paragraph, and I noticed in my working world, most people lack communication skills.
I'm not too sure on that one. I know they use it in phones and all these different things now, but I don't think it should be in schools and classrooms just because the kids need to learn basic stuff. Yeah.
I think as long as it is approached in a structured way that is like also learning for, like you're able to learn something from it, I think it can be used in moderation maybe, but I don't think relying on it is necessarily the best way to go.
I think that students should be taught how to use it as a tool that they can take advantage of it and not be left behind with the whole world taking advantage of it. And I think that it being a tool and not like something to rely upon to get your grades up that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, well, I think there's a way to properly use AI in schools. We hear a lot about ChatGPT and cheating on, exams in upper level university courses and even, junior level university courses. So I think, teaching the ethics behind that, no different than you would teach ethics in accounting or finance or whatever it might be.
Oh, for sure. Once more is known about it and we have the ethics and governance around it to take care of the data and the people that are using it, for sure, it's going to change the world.
Under some circumstances, yes. Why? Well, I believe that often teachers just don't have the expertise in everything that's out there, and artificial intelligence can be actually, programmed to be able to provide information that teachers cannot keep up on all the time. So yes, limited.
The largest provincial legislative building in Canada is located where? Toronto, Ontario, Regina, Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Alberta.
Toronto.
Edmonton?
Edmonton?
Gonna go Toronto?
Toronto?
Edmonton, Alberta.
I want to say Toronto. Yeah, let's go with Toronto.
Regina?
It's Regina.
Really?
Really?
I'm from Saskatchewan, so maybe I should know that.
Located in the provincial capital of Regina, Saskatchewan's legislature is the largest provincial legislative building in Canada. The building was officially opened in 1912 and to this day serves as a symbol of British parliamentary democracy and provincial pride. Also, the grounds surrounding the building have developed into one of the largest urban parks in North America.
Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, otherwise known as the Notwithstanding Clause, gives parliaments in Canada the ability to override certain parts of the Charter, notwithstanding the provisions of the Constitution. Recently, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, in a speech to the Canadian Police Association, suggested his government would for the first time use the Notwithstanding Clause on the federal level to help deal with court decisions on bail. Conversely, the Notwithstanding Clause was used by the Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec provincial governments in the past. But would using it on a federal level be acceptable, or would it compromise the integrity of the Charter? We took this question to Canadians.
Do you agree with government using the Notwithstanding Clause to change crime and punishment laws?
No, I find it's a bit scary. I'm not really in agreement with that. I think there need to be a lot more study behind this and really understanding what we're getting into. I would not be comfortable with that. No, not at all.
I think if everybody uses the notwithstanding clause, what's the point of having a federation of provinces, right? It's the same situation where if everything applies to everybody but it doesn't apply to me, you're kind of exhibiting the height of hubris by removing yourself from the common good and the common application. You have to measure at what point are you inclusive or excluding yourself from the table.
No, I don't. I think that our laws are good as they stand. I don't think we want to slip back into American-style lawmaking and the whims of one politician riding over the will of the people. So I think we have a pretty good system as it is today.
As a general rule, I'm not a fan of necessarily of like notwithstanding clauses because it speaks of like overreach or just authoritarianism.
Well, you shouldn't be able to overpass other people's jurisdictions who've already made a ruling. They've had the job, they've had the education, they know the system. One person shouldn't be able to override that.
I don't believe in the notwithstanding clause for anything. The only time we have seen it used is to violate someone's rights and to modify the charter, which is why it was put there. And it was put there so that we could get another minority in the Quebec government to in fact sign on. And I think it has now been abused since that time, and it's the Quebec government that's probably used it the most to abuse the human rights of people in their province. And I think that if you look at what Polyev is talking about, it's the same thing. We're going to use it to take away somebody's rights.
If they do that, then what's stopping them from changing other laws? As I've read in the paper, as I've seen, everybody calls it a slippery slope. And I definitely agree with that. Too much power corrupts. So if we let this one slide, all of a sudden, notwithstanding clauses are going to be used like Band-Aids.
I'm going to say no, because if they want to truly change laws and create a better society, they should go through the proper channels, get through the House of Commons and the Senate to build that reform. By using this notwithstanding clause, it's just a slippery slope to dictatorship.
I think that's taking things too far for sure, especially if it involves bypassing the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's what our country's built on. Once you start messing with that, then you start to get into a whole world of trouble.
And that we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms for a reason, and we're all entitled to those. And when those are able to be infringed based on, a politician's personal opinion or views, that's only setting up a recipe for disaster and more issues like that. I mean, we see it in the United States with people revoking abortion laws. And I think that will be the next step that comes from it.
That's a tough one because I'm a big believer in civil rights for everybody, right? So when it's been invoked in the past, it's impeded people's civil rights. And I don't think that's a right thing. So without some kind of review or debate over it and making it unilateral, I have a problem with that.
I think we need the checks and balances, and I think that that's a cornerstone of our democracy and citizenship and having people involved in how and when laws are going to be enforced and to whom.
Well, criminal, yeah, I mean, you have to take it in context. If Pierre is doing criminal justice reforms, I think that is just that part of it, I think, is based on the fact that right now I could go rob a bank and be out of court tomorrow. I'm in jail overnight. So I think what he's doing is he's taking the best parts of it and applying it to a problem is what he's doing. The Liberals, on the other hand, would obviously use it to their own benefit and just change laws that suit their needs. So there's a difference between using laws and changes to laws for common sense and achieving an agenda. And I think that's what's happening with it. And I have to do a little more research into that because I only just heard about that last week.
With a federal election happening in this country in a year and a half at the very latest, protecting our democracy from interference and disinformation seems to be becoming more of a priority as we draw closer to voting day. As part of CPAC's upcoming project focusing on disinformation and democracy both here in Canada and around the world, we took to the streets to ask people if disinformation will have an effect on the democratic process in this country. Our question:
Are you concerned disinformation could affect Canada's next election?
Yes, indeed. I would be concerned about disinformation affecting the next federal election. I think that with social media, people have to be discerning in what they are listening to and what they're reading. And it's upon all of us as citizens of Canada, democracy, and certainly want to maintain that democracy, that we are adept at reading different genres of news information and making sure that we are getting the right information concerning both the politicians and around the issues that different provinces are facing.
Yes. Why? I think there's way too many actors out there distributing information. I think there's way too many biased views being offered, and I think they're getting a far greater reach than they would get if they were the small fractions they used to be.
Social media plays into it?
I think social media plays a huge role in it.
What's that?
What's that? Why? Oh, it's just way too easy to distribute a point of view and make it sound as if it's reflective of a significant portion of the population when it's not.
You know, there's so much going on social media-wise, especially with Russians and Chinese. You know, they're in there meddling and doing their thing, and you know, it just is what it is. So it is a concern, yeah.
I'd like to think that we're smart enough not to just believe the first thing we see, but there's going to still be a handful of people that just take it as the gospel truth. And yeah, short answer, yes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different disinformation about like different leaders and what they want to bring to Canada in terms of progressing our society. And I think there's a lot of hate spouted on both sides for different parties to spread that disinformation.
Good question. Well, there's definitely a lot of disinformation, I think, on both sides. And people have to be more informed personally about what's going on in Canada and not make rash decisions based on what they hear from other people, that's for sure. Or other, you know, whether it's mainstream or alternative media, you know, there's a definite problem for sure.
Well, I mean, you have to, first of all, it's hard to discern what is disinformation, for one thing. You know, the Liberals accuse the Conservatives of disinformation and vice versa. And of course, the way social media runs these days, you know, there's so much fake news on there that it's really hard to discern what's true and what's not.
Oh, am I concerned? 100%, because people are very gullible. And it's hard to decide what news channels to trust and who to trust nowadays, because everyone has such close access to spreading their opinion. You could have a lot of followers, but not have a lot to say.
For sure. I think we saw even recently a lot of issues with photos of the Met Gala and people being convinced that people were at the Met Gala when they weren't celebrities and stars. I think if we're that susceptible to just, you know, a celebrity event, we're probably pretty susceptible to some misinformation for elections. So I think we have to be more considerate citizens and more aware of like what that means for disinformation and how to identify it just within our own lives, election or not.
Always a possibility. I mean, every government has their own reign, every government has their own fall. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it crumbled just as quick, right? I mean, you can have thousands of years of history and you can lose it all in a second.
I believe there's people who kind of gain from this information, and there's also people who are lazy, so they try to find information that's easy for them to access or that they agree with. So then it becomes the information. But a lot of, like the election, it's complex. There's nothing that's black and white. A lot of analysis needs to be made, and journalists, that's why they are here for. And I have opinions on things, but I also rely on deeper, like people who have deeper knowledge of a topic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's this. I think all politicians are full of disinformation, whether or not it's specific to coming from a party or coming from outside the country. For sure, that's a relevant point.
I think, yeah, I mean, disinformation is in any form, in any relationship is always a concern to me. So, yeah, I am.
Oh, absolutely. I think that disinformation, intentional and malicious, are two huge problems in particularly our online landscape. I think that really the only solution or the only approach is just to make sure that every person understands the risks of it and is able to identify sources that they trust. I don't think that there's really any way around it other than really just media literacy for everyday citizens.
I think there needs to be checks and balances with interference and, just doing due diligence. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't think people are very informed to begin with. So like whatever they do happen to read, if it is untrue, they're not going to follow up with it later to see if it actually is verified, and they're going to do their own research. So having it be verified, I don't think like an individual entity could probably do that, because like everybody has their biases, but disinformation is a problem.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on CPAC. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. I'm Glenn McGuinness, and on behalf of my colleagues at the Cable Public Affairs Channel, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.